Thank you, Carolyn. How fitting to start with a piece of music. For surely occasions like this are beyond the words and concepts that are and memories that are conjured up for us, you know. Looking at this little impromptu altar to Doug, 2 baby shoes, a rock, a baseball bat, a baseball, and an empty whiskey bottle. Each of them has their stories. We're here not just to support each other in our grief and our sense of loss from someone we cherish, but also to honor who that person was, who Doug was, how he conducted his life, how he related to his family and his friends, the ethical and upstanding person that he was, and the creative person that he was, and how he was able to express that through being a baker and many other things. So today we'll grieve. When someone dies so suddenly, it's not only a loss, it's a shock. So we'll grieve the shocking loss. And we will acknowledge and honor who Doug was and what he gave to each of us. And you can probably tell that I knew Doug in his Zen days. I was noticing his Zen robes there, and as they frayed around the collar, there's a whole row of neat, small stitches holding them together. So, his family and his friends will offer some words, and then we'll open up to all of you if you want to add something. So, please.
This is my diploma. Henry and I have been very quiet for 4 weeks. It's been very hard for us to process that you are gone, simply gone, just like that. So healthy, so strong, so present, so in shape, so vital, so alive in every cell of your body, and then gone. You were going to live to 93 or 95, and we believed you because you were believable in your strength, your love for your body, your inner peace, your existence. We all love you. We're here to celebrate you, Doug, and love you. I felt your presence, a clear, strong essence of your presence 2 mornings ago, next to me in spirit, not form. You were a strong, radiating presence as Doug. I know you are here. On the Sunday evening before you died, we sat eating dinner, and I said to you that we have reached the waterfall. There is love everywhere. Can you feel it? It is palpable. It is real. We are here. I'm not certain if you said anything, but you nodded in awareness. My heart hurts with the loss of you physically beside me. I am now experiencing the meaning of beloved. Love is real. You are here. Still, we are here with you, Doug. At our wedding, we chose a Buddhist wedding because nothing else made sense to us. Your Zen practice and meditation were the fabric I wanted to hold us in marriage. We, meaning the Buddhists who were present, said the Heart Sutra to open our hearts. We closed with a chant that removes all obstacles to love, which is all I truly desired for our marriage, our sacred covenant of joining. Under this black blanket of a shroud, I'm wearing this dress for echolocation for you, Doug, so you can find us here. It is the dress I wore on the last evening of the bike trip in Connemara County in Ireland at the Ashford Lodge on the grounds of the Ashford Castle, the Guinness family's summer home. Our bike leaders had told us to dress up, and because we were going to a wedding weekend the next day, we were a little more dressed up than the others. The evening began with an Irish whiskey tasting. The evening was electric that night with pleasure and celebration of our week together in Ireland, Connemara County. I shared your favorite Irish whiskey with family last night, just a wee bit for everyone who wanted some. This is why I've been quiet these past 4 weeks, to simply be with all this love.
Hey, how are you? I formulated what I wanted to say today about my dad over the last few weeks, mostly while running at the gym, and the goal that I realized that I want to achieve today is to give everyone here a view of the experience that I had with Doug as an amazing dad that he was to me. And everyone here has met my dad in their own individual way, from growing up in Puyallup, to traveling the world wherever he went, to the Zen Center or working at Acme. But I'm the only one here that knew him as my father. I think my dad probably would say that he liked me the most when I was a little kid. That's when me and my dad were best friends. And growing up, my dad would always get up super early for work to go to the bakery, and some mornings, most mornings, he would leave me sticky notes telling me the score of the Giants or the Warriors of the 49ers game and telling me to have a good day. And I didn't remember this until me and my mom were looking through photos for the slideshow that we made, and we found some of these notes that she had saved. But what I do remember about these years was getting home from school and waiting for my dad at the front window for his car to pull up so we could play. And I'm sure most of the time, that was probably the last thing my dad wanted to do after working 10 to 12 hours at the bakery. But I can't remember a time that he refused, whether it was playing catch in the backyard, or coaching my Little League team, or roughhousing, or just watching sports. My dad was always there, and we did everything together during these years. And then as I entered my teenage years, my relationship with my father began to strain. But this, I think, is when my dad did his best work as my dad, when our relationship was at its worst. I had turned into an angsty teenager, or as my dad might describe, as a terrorist in his household. And I think my dad couldn't relate to me during this period of our relationship, and I know that was really hard on him. And he worried about me a lot, but he never quit on me, and he was always so patient with me. There's one critical lesson and memory that I had these past few weeks that taught me a lot. It was when I told my dad I wanted to quit a travel baseball team that I was on. And understandably, he was really disappointed at me for quitting the team. But he told me I could do it as long as I was the one to tell my coach that I wanted to quit, which horrified me when I was 13 or 14 years old that I had to do this. But once I mustered up the courage to do it, I understood the importance of what my dad was teaching me, to deal with confrontation head on, which working in sales for the last 5 years is something that I have to deal with every day professionally. And I know it's something that my dad dealt with at Acme every single day. I'm still working on implementing that skill to my personal life, but it's an important one that I'm glad he taught me. My favorite part of the relationship that I have with my father has been over the last 10 years, as I slowly turned into a man that he had molded. And as I grew into a man, our relationship grew past my dad being law and order in my life and back to us being best friends again. My relationship with my father these last 10 years has been kind of like a Swiss Army knife. He was whatever I needed him to be. I could lean on him for professional advice, bust his balls on his political views, or cry to him about my girlfriend leaving me for another man, which my dad had a lot of experience in. And every time I called him or talked to him, he was whatever I needed him to be that day. And while I'll always wish I could have more time with him, I'm forever grateful for these 27 years that I had with him as a father. Shortly after I learned of my dad's sudden passing, I called one of my best friends, Mo, in complete shock, and one of his first questions to me was asking me when the last time I spoke with my dad was. And at the time, the question nearly made me implode as I tried to remember the last thing that I said to my dad. And it took me weeks to muster up the courage to look at the text that I had with my dad to see what was the last thing I said. It wasn't until last week when I was putting together this slideshow that I had the courage to look. And the last thing I said to my dad was telling him how well the 49ers quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo was going to do in Las Vegas with women. And this made me smile. There's one last thing I want to say about my father, is that he lived a wonderful life. He had amazing friends, an accomplished career, and a beautiful wife. My dad loved his life. He loved his life so much he wanted to live forever. And I'll miss my dad forever. And I'm sad for all the memories we won't get to experience together. But I'm so happy knowing and being a part of the amazing story of my dad. And I'm so happy to celebrate it with all of you today.
Boy, this is a big room.
We are Doug's siblings. I am Christine. This is Greg. And I am just slightly younger, much younger actually, than my brother Doug. And Greg is about 6 years younger, a little bit younger.
I think.
I think I know so, yeah. We could tell you a lot of stories. I won't talk that long, but there's a lot of stories to be told about Doug. And we knew the true Doug. We knew him growing up, and he could be a stinker, but he was also a wonderful big brother to us. Our parents were Al and Jeanette Volkmer, and they were true World War II parents, post-World War II parents, and they were honest and hardworking, committed to their families, and didn't believe in spoiling their kids. We learned to work before we played, respect our elders. Nothing came free, and honesty was the only policy. They trusted us, and if we broke their trust, there would be consequences. We knew our parents loved us, and we worked very hard to maintain that trust. Doug was just one school grade ahead of me when we were in elementary school and on. Our elementary school was like a half a block from our home, and I didn't remember this. Mac, you told me that Doug was the first class to attend Karshner School. Is that correct? Yeah. The first year to go through, and I was the second year, so I followed behind. We always walked home for lunch. We had our peanut butter and jelly sandwiches that Mom had prepared, and usually Dad was there to have lunch with us. And then we would walk the short half block back to school. Mom, of course, served as all of our room mothers forever, was president of the PTA probably multiple years. And Doug and I, and later Greg, would die of embarrassment when Mom would invite our teachers and even our principal to come to our home and have dinner with us. I mean, that was, more than we could really do.
There's no getting out of it.
No.
No.
We had to be on our best behavior, of
Yes.
course. So. Our hometown of Puyallup, Washington, was small and very rural when we were kids growing up. It was the best place to grow up. Our great-grandmother, Lucy Benedict, was a little ahead of her time back then, and she owned 15 acres of raspberries that surrounded her home and our home, which was adjacent to her home. And Doug and I, not so much Greg, because, he was the baby. We grew up picking raspberries and helping in the fields wherever we were needed.
I drove the tractor.
Well, I'm sure Doug did too. That's where you learned to
Yeah.
drive with Doug, yeah. We hated it because we really wanted to be playing. But like I said earlier, work came before play. And I'm certain those days in the raspberry field helped us form a pretty good work ethic. As we progressed through the years, Doug and I, and into junior and high school, I was always put out when the first day of school they would read the roll and they would say, Chris Volkmer, and they'd pause and they would say, you must be Doug's sister. And I guess I was the goody two-shoes of the family. But Doug was much less concerned with being punctual, turning in his assignments, doing well on tests. He relied on his considerable charms to get away with almost anything, and it always galled me. And you too, yeah.
True.
Of course, you followed both of us, so.
Well, yeah, but when it came to my time, they go, Volkmer, I know that name.
I know that name, yeah. Following in his footsteps was not something we always enjoyed.
No.
No. Doug was an athlete all through school and took great pride in that. Our dad, Al, coached his Little League team, which was called the Splicers, coached it for years and years. And they won several championships. Dad made sure all the kids, they were all neighborhood kids, all played, no matter what their skill level, they all played and took turns. And for many summers, our summers
Yes.
revolved around Little League baseball. It was
Yes.
very important to Doug and to Dad. As Doug moved on into school, he focused on playing basketball. And he was on the varsity basketball team all through his high school. And of course, Mom and Dad went to every single game, didn't matter where it was. We also went to every single football game. We didn't ever miss the Puyallup High
No.
School
Nope.
games. My friends always knew if they needed a ride to any athletic event just to get a hold of me because Dad was always there. And we had a big station wagon, so there was always room for them. Doug continued playing basketball 2 years after high school. He loved it. He knew he wasn't a four-year college level talent, but he gave it his all for all those years through high school and into college.
He did.
He did. He loved
Yes.
it, yeah. Doug always had a pack of friends, and many of his dearest friendships were made starting in grade school. One of those kids is here today, and that's Mac Riley, one of the geezers. Went all the way through Karshner with Doug and then on. Mac lived just a few blocks from us, and their friendship has endured for over 70 years. Doug's pack of friends had a knack of showing up at our house just before mealtime. Our mother was a very good cook, and she loved nothing more than feeding hungry boys. There was always one more chicken she could put on the barbecue. Of course, as the young sister, I had little use for these boys, and I would just be angry when they would eat and immediately have to leave. They always had somewhere they had to go. And of course, I then had to help Mom clean up and wash the dishes, and they were off playing somewhere. And naturally, Doug and Greg were Mom's favorites. Of course, I was my dad's favorite, so.
It's true.
Yeah. As with most siblings, our lives diverged when Doug first left to go to college, and then I left, and Greg was home alone with Mom and Dad.
Home alone.
Yeah, yeah. Doug was always independent and put himself through college doing very heavy and oftentimes dangerous construction jobs. He worked on the Masaryk Dam
Yes.
in Washington, traveled quite a distance, 60 miles each way.
Until they lived up there. They stayed up there.
Some of the men did.
Yes.
Yeah, during the week.
Then they'd come home on the weekends, of
Right.
course, for a get-together.
Yeah.
I don't know what that entailed because I was too little.
We weren't involved, were we? No. You know, this is kind of an aside, but on one of Doug's trips home, it was often at night, it was often dark.
Yeah.
He swears to this day he saw a UFO. I mean, he truly believed he saw a UFO and told all us, and he was very earnest about it.
And my father, if it fell out of the sky, it was a helicopter, which we did. We had a helicopter crash in our bear field when we were quite young. And my brother was telling the story, yeah, I saw this thing and it was doing this, doing that. My father was looking at him going, okay, I want some blood samples right now, you know. And to this day, I think he'd still say, I saw a UFO.
Oh, he did see.
Yeah.
Yeah. After college and 1 year of working, Doug left for a 6-month trip to Europe and came home over 4 years later. During this time, he learned about bread baking, Buddhism, and Zen, which led him to San Francisco, eventually to Ann and Acme Bread and life in Berkeley, California, which was his adopted hometown. Yeah. Doug lived a full and good life filled with adventures, learning, success, some disappointments, good health, wonderful friends, and much love. He was an honorable man who cared deeply for others and our environment, wanting to make the world truly a better place. There was no deceit or manipulation in Doug. What you saw was exactly the person he was. He loved his friends and family and cherished any opportunity to be with them. He loved Anne and adored Henry, and Henry was his absolute pride and joy. We will miss Doug always, but are so proud of the son, brother, husband, father, uncle, and friend he was. Looking around this room, we realize how loved and respected he was by so many. Thank you for being here and for loving our Doug in your own special way.
Thank you.
My name is Mike Notaro. I would like to talk about an incredible group of friends that Doug has been a part of for over 65 years. I first met Doug when we were sophomores at Puyallup High School, when we double dated, which was a thing he did then. Mac Riley has been friends with Doug since grade school. The three of us met Harvey Steele in our early college years. Time passed, our lives took us in different but often overlapping directions. Mac and Harvey went into the Army. Doug and I roomed together a few times in college. He graduated before me and got a job in construction. I eventually graduated and ended up as a commercial fisherman in Alaska. Harvey and Mac returned to Washington, went back to school. Then they began their careers in commercial construction. In 1972, while I was in Alaska, Mac, Doug, and Harvey planned a camping trip. They got a late start, no surprise, and they hit the trailhead about dark. They lost the trail at some point and were bushwhacking to find the trail again. Suddenly, Harvey disappeared. Eventually, Doug and Mac heard him calling and located him down a steep cliff lying in a rocky creek bed. He was busted up and cold. Mac headed out to get the search and rescue team. Doug climbed down the cliff by hanging on to bushes and rocks. He spent the night talking to Harvey to keep him from going into shock, becoming hypothermic. That was truly a bonding experience for the three of them. Fortunately, Harvey recovered and life went on. Doug and I had a bonding experience of another kind. When we were about 24 years old, it was around 1975. Doug had just returned from his year-and-a-half adventure, traveling and working in Europe, Australia, Asia. He finally came home in mid-February and was living with his parents in his boyhood home. It can rain for weeks on end in Western Washington in February, and he was not exactly enjoying himself. About this time, I flew down from Alaska, having finished a crabbing season, and I was bucks up. Doug and I spent a couple days moping around in the rain, and finally I said, "Let's get out of here. Let's go to Hawaii. I'm buying." He agreed. So for the next 5 or 6 weeks, we wandered around the islands, having fun, beach camping, spearfishing, and eating a lot of brown rice and fish. Then we ended up with infected legs, Doug from a coral scrape, and me from trying to climb a coconut palm tree. We finally got some antibiotics, moved into a Filipino boarding house for a week, and recuperated. We were soon a group of 7. Mac married Ann Salter, Harvey married V, and I married Kathy. Doug was still searching for his soulmate. Then he found and fell in love with Ann Williams. They married in 1990. Their wedding was a high point, except for the Class A hangovers the next day. We were now a solid group of 8, plus a few children added on. Then, 1996 was a great year. Henry was born, and Doug turned 50. Ann planned a party, and we all came down from Washington to celebrate and meet Henry. He was a lot smaller then. Throughout this time, and for the remainder of our lives, Doug and Ann have been the catalyst that brought us back together and reaffirmed the bond of friendship that continued to grow stronger over the decades. As the rest of us were moving toward Medicare, retirement, and grandkids, Doug was coaching Henry's baseball team of 8-year-olds. Mac was done coaching soccer. Harvey was perfecting his hunting, fishing, and food preservation skills. And I was almost done coaching girls' high school volleyball. Eventually, Henry went off to school in Boulder, and Doug and Ann joined the ranks of empty nesters. We as a group had more time, and our gatherings became more frequent and more important. Whenever Doug and Ann would come up to Washington to see his family, we would all get together and try to remember the details of our decades of adventures. We often reminisced about our poor student days and argued over who had the coolest sports cars in those days. Doug had an Alfa Romeo, Mac had an MG Midget, Harvey had an MGA, and I had an Austin Healey, which I loved. For the last 20 years or so, we've made a point of planning an annual gathering. Sometime around 10 years ago, we started calling ourselves Geezers as a group, an acknowledgement of our gray hair, various surgeries, and joint replacements. So naturally, our gatherings became the much anticipated Geezer Fests. We don't throw horseshoes anymore, but we throw beanbags and play cornhole. We've moved the boards a little closer together, and scoring is a little harder. But really, the hardest part is agreeing on the score. We always enjoy great feasts, take lots of pictures, and truly love each other's company. So now it seems that we have moved into the final stage of the circle of life. There are now 7 Geezers. As natural as this progression is, it is so painful. Doug was a man with love in his heart and a beautiful, shining spirit. I really believe that if there were more men like Douglas Alfred Volkmer in this world, it would be a better place. Here's my dear friend, and I'm really going to miss him.
Hi, I'm Nick Rayfield, married to Ann's sister, Martha. And I'm going to read a poem by Bruce Denner, my poem on my Doug. In an instant, all is gone. A smile could wipe out a frown. Of course, it can go the other way, and that we know is a very rainy day. In a flash, he was gone in the way he began a marathon, so different with me. His every day, a picture of serenity. He was that way before I knew his name, sitting on a table, smiling, greeting every runner coming down the chute, his legs playfully dangling, teaching me with Buddha mind. 26.2 was a joyful thing to do. How best it is to take everything in your stride, in serenity. We come alive, taste every morsel of food you eat, pay close attention to every soul you meet. The succulents he planted on his hillside with so much care were as much his friends he met everywhere. In a remote corner of Afghanistan, where he learned to hide his VW bus at night. The Iranians who he welcomed in the morning light, who helped him lift his bus that he foolishly parked in a ditch that floods. All these close-called blunders, too, he taught me to see as a source of wonder. to find the yogic pose that would stretch my mind across my days. Now, I'm a secular man. It's all about molecules in motion, or at least that's the current notion, of waves vibrating, strings, dark matter, and other wondrous things. Yet I can't shake the belief when I too go the end of the final shoot, he'll be there to grab my hand with his firm grasp, as he always did. And for those that think this a foolish fantasy, I agree, and so would he. Yet what better way to spend a day?
How amazing. So now we'll have an opportunity for any of you in the audience who know Doug, if you'd like to offer a few words of connection and appreciation and maybe commiseration. I think there are people who have wireless mics. Okay, so that part hasn't happened. So if you'd like to say a few words, you can just come up to the front and speak into this mic.
Okay, good. What's this thing? Hello, everybody. I'm John Rieger, and my son Hunter was actually in one of those pictures up there. He's a little tiny guy in an A's Little League Baseball jersey. And I'm going to, that's where I met Doug, and today I'm going to just tell you 3 short stories about Doug, 3 memories about Doug, and they're all about love. First of all, of course, we all know Doug loved to bake, and I hope this story is not apocryphal, Anne. I believe you told me that he baked for you on your first date. Well, of course, Doug and Acme Bread went on to become one of the charismatic megafauna of what I consider to be Berkeley's geological age, the Epicurocene. And it's really changed all our lives. We take it for granted sometime, but I'm reminded of what a big difference it made for all of us. Every Orange Friday, when Susan and I sit down to watch the home 49ers baseball game with chili cheese dogs on Acme hot dog buns. They're the best. Don't leave this earth without trying this dish. And every time you taste one, you can taste the love. My second story is about baseball, and it was wonderful to hear the baseball story of Doug filled in today. I see he got many of his good traits from his father, and he reproduced them in his coaching. He had the great gift of taking a team of hellacious 10-year-olds and teaching them how to win a baseball game and yet at the same time be kind to one another. He combined sportsmanship, competitiveness, and love for the children that made being on his team really the pinnacle of our El Cerrito youth baseball career. I actually saw Henry the other night. He was over at our house, and I had a chance to, we were catching up, I had a chance to mention that to him. I also was reminded of another episode. One day I was walking my poodle, Carlos, down at the Albany Bulb, and I came across, it was a gray, blustery day down by the bay, and Doug was stalking the heath in the high part of the park, accompanied, of course, by his perfectly groomed little gray terrier. HB. So you can imagine this as a kind of a Victorian novel with Doug stalking, and I came upon him, how now? And Doug begins, well, I'm in a terrible state. I can't understand what's happened to Henry. He was my best friend, and now he hates me. Why does he hate me? He was in anguish. The guy reminded me for a minute of a naked tree branch in the wind. And I said something, something useless like, well, I have an older son and he was really a jerk too, and he grew out of it. But I have never forgotten that episode because the love that Doug expressed for his family was absolutely overwhelming. It poured out. It was the animating force that had him on his feet, stalking through the heather up there, trying to think of a plan, trying to figure out what to do, and of course, walking his terrier. So, those are my 3 stories about Doug, and they are stories about love, and I suggest that that's how we remember him.
A lot of people here. I'm Steve Sullivan. My wife and I started a bakery in 1983, the Acme Bread Company, and one of our very, very first employees was Peter Overton from the Zen Center. And after a few months, at a certain point, Peter started talking about a friend of his who worked at Tassajara Bakery as well. He said, this guy is as tall as me, and he's all hands. So we were really eager to meet this fellow. That's how we met Doug. He came to work at the bakery. He was among our first 3 or 4 bakers, people to work as a baker at the bakery. And we were immediately just bowled over, I guess. We were sort of amateurs, and we were sort of bowled over by the ease and grace and competence that he could bring to any task in the bakery that might come up. And then we were also amused and impressed with the ease and grace and competence with which he could delegate those tasks to others when it seemed appropriate, which at the time seemed a little funny, but as the company faced pressure to grow a little bit, we realized that was important. And Doug had taught us one of the first of many lessons that we learned having him with us for over 30 years. And when we found ourselves under pressure to increase the size of the company, to grow beyond our original 4 walls, we had decided, Susie and I, long before, that we would not expand the company with money that walked in the door in people's checkbooks, but with bakers from within the company. And Doug was our very first choice as somebody to approach about that as a possibility. I remember we were a little alarmed because he said he had to think about it, he had to talk with people about it, and that meant there was a possibility he would say no. So he said he wanted to meet with us at our house, and remember sitting down with him at our table, and Susie and I were looking at him expectantly, and he looked back and he said, "Fuck yeah." So that was this beginning of the second chapter of Doug with Acme, and very early in that chapter, I don't know if you recall, we finally got the second bakery going in 1989, and the Giants were in the World Series that year, which was exciting for all of us, and as that World Series commenced, the earth shook. And it was in the late afternoon, and there were very few people in the bakery at that time. Our daughter, Rebecca, was in the bakery after school. Her school was just down the street. Doug was in the bakery. The bakery looked really big, big tile floor stretched out. When the earthquake hit, it looked like a carpet that somebody had shook. And I had never felt anything like that before. And I immediately started looking around, trying to figure out if the people there were okay and where everybody was. Found Doug, and I said, "Doug, do you know where Rebecca is?" And I think she was in the proof box or something. We found Rebecca. I said, "I've never felt anything like that before. That was intense." Doug looked at me and he said, I've felt quakes like that before. I don't know whether he had or not, but but he wasn't overly impressed with it. Then we went up on the roof and watched as the fires started to break out in San Francisco. And at that point, he agreed that it might have been a little bit out of the ordinary. Anyway, the years went slowly at first because it was really difficult, and then the years sped up as they do. But there's really no way that our company, I don't think, could have become as good a company as it is. Not that it's, not that it's great, but it wouldn't have been however good it is, it wouldn't have been that good without Doug's humanity, his diligence, his competence, his grace, and his heart. So we're grateful, very grateful.
My name is Peter Overton, and as Stephen alluded to, I knew Doug from the Tassajara Bakery. We were there working in the basement of a rather old bakery. I don't really remember why Doug showed up. I knew he had come to the Zen Center, and he obviously had an appeal as someone who could work well, the right attitude and so forth. And I really enjoyed working with him. I felt like, along with several other people, he was sort of the one who led us in a certain way, which was all the qualities that people have mentioned were present and visible, but I kept asking myself, where is this guy coming from? And I thought, what he cares about most is his love of doing his best in whatever situation he happened to be in. And after I moved to the East Bay and started working at Acme Bread, I thought, this is really the place Doug needs to be, because Stephen was also that kind of person, and is that kind of person who just cares about what he's doing at any particular moment with a sort of intensity and love that really transports everybody around them. So I feel grateful for having spent the time I did with Doug and marveled at his creativity and I'm not surprised to see all of you here because he was a person who touched many people's hearts. Thank you for this opportunity just to express my appreciation.
Oh, holy moly guacamole, they weren't lying. There is a lot of people here. Hi, everybody. I'm Alicia Volkmer. I am Doug's niece, which means I am Greg's daughter. I'm just going to share a few memories off the top of my head. I'm probably going to ramble, but that's okay. My first memories of my uncle were at my Nana and my Papa's house in Puyallup, Washington. They had a very old house that had shag green rug that was about that high. And I remember wrestling and playing, and I would dress up because my Nana used to get me fancy outfits from yard sales, and I would put boas on, and I would have high heels, and I would just work it. And I just thought I was the coolest thing. And I was the center of my Aunt Chris and my Uncle Doug and my Aunt Ann. And then one day we found out that my Aunt Ann was pregnant, which was amazing. My uncle was so happy. And then this little bald-headed, chubby kid showed up, and I said, well, what's going on here? Why is he getting all the attention? Why does Nana like him so much? What is going on? And I can just remember playing in the backyard. She had a huge backyard, and the bread. Oh, can we talk about the bread? He would bring bread from California, and we would cook in my Nana's backyard, and we would eat and eat and eat. And I cannot tell you how many times that I would ask, Uncle Doug, will you just send me bread for my birthday? And I would always tell people how proud I was of my uncle, and that I thought it was so cool that he worked at a bakery and that restaurants had his bread in their restaurants. And I just thought, you know, my uncle was a celebrity, and I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. And when I would come and visit my Aunt Ann and my Uncle Doug, we would go to restaurants that would have the bread, and I was just like, what? I'm eating at a restaurant that has my uncle's bread? Wow. I just thought that was the coolest thing. And then my Auntie Chris, we would go to Lake Chelan, and we would all spend time together. We would go on my Uncle Tim's boat, and we would get on the, what is that thing called? The thing that goes on the water and ba-boom, ba-boom? Inner tube. Oh my gosh, yes, we would go on the inner tube, and I think the very last time that I did it, I was about 14 or 15, and I came home, and I couldn't walk. Now I'm 33, and I would probably be crippled if I did it. Thank you for listening.
So, Thank you all for those wonderful images, those sweet and loving memories. May they forever hold us in and remind us what's important in life. You know, of all the things we have to deal with and all the decisions and priorities we have to set. It's really wonderful to have a recollection of what's most important. And in that regard, I would like to offer you a Buddhist chant. It's a Buddhist chant to Kanzeon. And Kanzeon in Buddhism is the personification of compassion and love. And I think that Doug somehow touched that in his Zen years. Maybe he touched it when he was a little child, probably. But anyway, I think in his Zen years, something became apparent to him. And then he lived that in his life. May we always remember him for that. And may we always remember that how could that not apply to each one of us? Yeah. So I'll stand a little further from the mic. It's a short verse. It repeats itself. Kanzeon namo butsuyo butsu enyo butsu embo poso enyo rakagajo onen kanzeon bonen kanzeon nen yushinki nen furishin kanzeon namo butsuyo butsu en Obutsu embo bozo enjo ragaga jojo nen ganzeon bonen zeon nen jujin kinen nen furishin anzeon namu obutsu obutsu en Obutsu embo poso enjo ragiga jojo nen ganzeon bonen zeon nen yujin kinen nen furishin. Do you want to say anything about the reception? I will? Okay. There is now a reception at Anne and Henry's house, which is on 1053 Mariposa Avenue, and everyone's invited? Yeah, you're all invited. Lovely. Yeah. One other thing. When I was talking to Anne about this ceremony, I was saying that there's an Irish tradition, and since they've just come back from Ireland, maybe she was receptive to it. And the Irish tradition is that the immediate family stand at the back of the church. And then as you're leaving, you just offer them this greeting. I'm sorry for your loss. Yeah. Just something simple, something heartfelt, and in a way, something completely universal. Thank you.
it's all just make-believe. And all I've ever known is myself. You won't get the best of me. It's the soul of the world. I've been trying to find a good time for corners of the world. All I found is love. Where do we go when we leave from here? We will not know till we disappear. Nobody don't know. No. Where do we go when we leave from here? It's the soul of the world. I've been trying to find a good time for corners of the world. All I found is love. It's the soul of the world. It's the soul of the world. It's the soul of the world. All I found is love. It's the soul of the world. It's the soul of the world. Oh. It's the soul of the world. I've been finding a good time through all the troubles that we had. Darkness take a hold of my mind. I know it's all inside my head. It's the soul of the world. I've been trying to find a good time for corners of the world. All I found is love. It's a mystery to myself. Maybe it's all just make-believe. And all I've ever known is myself. You won't get the best of me.